This November 24th, 2015. For purposes of roll call, I'll just note that Director Hilliard and Director Lee and myself, Director Wolk, or Chair Wolk, are here. Vice Chair Bill Marble is, at the moment at least, absent. We also have Sid England here from UC Davis. Approval of the agenda, next item. Are there any changes to the agenda, Dennis?
None that we have.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion passes 3-0 with Director Marble absent. Public comment. At this point, any member of the public may comment on any item that isn't on the agenda. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close public comment, bringing us to agency business. The first item are consent items, A through D. Are there any comments on that? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Approved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion passes 3-0 with Director Marble absent, but Director Marble has just joined us. Hey, Bill. We just already got through consent. So. Did you have any consent issues? No. Okay. Okay, so that brings us to our second item of agency business, which is the Davis Woodland Water Supply Project update. Dennis.
Yes, Chair Wolk and board members, a brief update for you this afternoon. Things are going very well on the project. We are rapidly approaching the point where we're looking at the end of construction and getting into startup activity. So I'll give you a brief update here this afternoon. So on our funding efforts, the SRF loans, the $111 million loan for Woodland's portion of the facilities, we have received $71 million in loan proceeds to date. That's 64% of the total. Similarly, for Davis's $95.5 million loan, we've received 60%. So we're very much in a pattern of submitting monthly requests and getting reimbursed 2 to 3 months later, and it's going very well. On the financing, the grants for the joint intake, again, we are seeking $40.2 million total, $20.1 million each from the state and feds. We have received essentially the full amount from the federal government now. $19.7 million has been made available, and the only comment on the remainder is that about an additional $400,000 is being reserved and available once change orders are approved. So if we have additional change orders, those will be funded up to the total of $20.1 million. On the state side, we are still seeking $8.1 million in grant funds. As we've discussed in the past, the agency has submitted 2 applications, one to the Department of Fish and Wildlife for $8.1 million, and then a second application to the Delta Conservancy for $2 million. The Fish and Wildlife application remains on track. The Delta Conservancy, we were recently informed of a desire by the Conservancy Board to solicit applications. Ultimately, they decided to extend the application deadline or to reopen the application deadline to December 17th. Director Hilliard did attend the board meeting, urged them to stay the course with their original solicitation, but at the end of the day, they decided to reopen. So what that means for us is probably a 4 to 6 week delay in terms of the timing for the announcement of the grant awards. The list for environmental and permitting utility coordination is shrinking. Under the environmental and permitting, we do continue to work on our application for our permit to operate from the State Board's Division of Drinking Water. We did adopt and certify and file the notice of determination for the ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. That clears the decks for Woodland to proceed with the installation of their ASR wells. And we have been coordinating with both the State Board and the Department of Fish and Wildlife on the temporary pumping facility at the joint intake, and we'll talk more about that later in the agenda. And then in terms of utility coordination, a fairly significant milestone on the project, the permanent PG&E power has been installed at the regional water treatment facility. So the contractor can now go about the business of distributing that power to the various unit processes. In terms of the joint intake project, construction continuing. The major concrete work is essentially complete at the intake structure. They've installed the fish screens and related equipment. They are currently removing the intake cofferdam, cutting down the cofferdam so that the screens are directly accessed, and the structure is flooded up to the level of the river now. And they've encased the pipelines below County Road 17, or 117. So just a few pictures. This is the joint intake, and looking between the cofferdam and the concrete structure is where the fish screens are being installed. This is a photo that shows the concrete encasement on County Road 117 going over our pipelines and RD 2035's pipelines. At the regional water treatment facility, major concrete's done. We're nearing the end of the installation of the major mechanical equipment and starting to focus on electrical equipment and instrumentation. The erection of the metal buildings is ongoing, as well as the work at the operations building. Earthwork activities at the solids drying bed, a fair amount of activity there in the last month to 6 weeks. And through the end of October, construction is 84% complete, and the contractor has billed the agency for a total of $121 million. This is a picture of the metal maintenance building that's been erected. This is a photo of the backwash equalization basin, and they're in the process of installing sludge collection equipment within the basin. This is a photo of the gravity thickeners and the finished handrail that's been installed. This is a picture looking down on top of the filters, and you can see that they're grouting the troughs at the facility. Some of the instrumentation going into the chemical storage and feed facility. The finished water pump station. The pumps are installed. The electrical wiring and cabling is being put in place. So in terms of off-site pipeline construction, the pipelines are installed. The roadway restoration on County 103, the paving on 103 is about, well, the southbound lane is about 90% complete, and the northbound lane repairs are yet to be made. The contractor did run into some soft substructure or soft base that needs to be addressed, so they're working through that now. As indicated in our weekly report we've been sending out, County Road 22 was shut down for a brief period to do additional repairs. That work has been done. County Road 22 was opened up yesterday. So in terms of the off-site pipeline, the installation of appurtenances and miscellaneous items continues. And we still have some work to do at the Davis metering station, which is the transition point between the regional facilities and the Davis's existing distribution system right across from the solar farm there. You'll see a little structure going up. That's where all of the metering and chemical monitoring takes place. It's a photo of the roadway restoration on 103. This is some of the piping installation that'll at the Davis metering station. So in terms of upcoming activities and milestones, obviously continue to pursue our remaining state grant funds for the joint intake, continue our coordination along 103 with the county and with the contractor, and then we do have a little bit of coordination with PG&E yet to do with the installation of the power to the off-site facilities, which is adjacent to our joint intake. Permitting, continue our work to obtain our permit to operate, and we do need to prepare and submit a temporary urgency change petition for the temporary pumping. Basically, it's a We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's allowing us to divert through the existing intake until the new joint intake is completed. Schedule milestones. This list is getting shorter as well. It's the same as you've seen in the last few months. As I mentioned, we have permanent power to the regional plant now. Commissioning exercises by CH2M Hill will begin in January. They'll start doing individual testing of pieces of equipment. Still scheduled for substantial completion of the treatment plant and pipelines, and beginning of the acceptance test in May, with completion in June and delivery beginning to the cities, the delivery of treated surface water to the cities. And then we're now looking at acceptance of the agency's part of the joint intake in August. This is the same project cost table that you've seen in the past, not unchanged from our previous meetings. The total regional project cost of $204.5 million. And that's my report, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dennis? Sid? No?
I just wanted to be appropriate.
Sure, yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that I want to first of all thank Sam Jones and Dennis for helping us. We have about $7.7 million of construction costs for the part of the project that are on the campus. And we worked very hard to try to get an SRF loan for that part of the construction, and Sam and Dennis helped us tremendously in that effort. But the university's not, we had a conference call one day with the assistant deputy director of the Department of Water Resources, and they just said, you guys are not anybody we've ever dealt with before, and you're just different, and we don't know how to do it. Because we don't have an installed client base that we can say we're creating a new funding stream, and that's going to be dedicated to you to repay the funds. So the bottom line was we could not find a funding stream that we could dedicate to them that were sufficient to meet their federal requirements, and that this is getting way over my head, but that the bonding agencies the university works with would not require such subordination of it that the people at the state would be satisfied. So try our best, we did, but it didn't work out. So we're going to be funding the project with our normal university financing mechanisms. And as a result of that, it will cost the university more money over time, but we still get the benefit of the SRF loans that both the agency and the City of Davis have gotten for those parts that we share. So we really appreciate that as well. So that's how we're heading. So right now we're going through the paperwork to get the university financing in place for that element of it. So we'll be going out and we'll be finalizing the funding hopefully next week. We look to go out to bid first week of January. Notice to proceed with construction will probably be early March, and start construction mid-March, testing and commissioning in November, and substantial completion in December. So we're about 3 months or so behind where the rest of the two cities are, but we'll be ready about a year from now. So we'll have it all in place, and it'll all happen finally. So thanks for everybody for their patience on this thing, and again, Dennis and Sam, thanks for your help as we tried to work that out.
Thanks, Sid. Bill, do you have anything? No. Jim? Nothing from me. So, thanks, Dennis.
Sure.
That brings us to item 3 at this point, which is the change order number 15 to the CH2M Hill Engineers Service Contract. Dennis.
Right, and so this item 3, and then the following item, the addendum number 8, they're related. So I just have a very brief presentation on the temporary pumping plant, and a follow-up to our discussion last meeting. Here we go. Okay, so at our last board meeting, in September, we presented the option to build a temporary 38 million gallon per day pumping facility at the existing intake in order to allow us to maintain our schedule for the acceptance test by CH2M Hill. And we also considered just delaying the startup and testing until the new joint intake facility is completed. Ultimately, the board agreed with the staff recommendation to proceed with the temporary pumping plant. So this is a photo, an aerial photo. This is the existing intake. This is where the joint intake is being constructed. And this is Conaway's main canal. So conceptually, the water will will come through the existing intake. Perhaps some test water will come through the joint intake, and it will be deposited in the Conaway's main canal. The temporary pumping facility will be installed here. So the water will be drawn out of the canal, run through the temporary pumps, and then into the agency's raw water pipeline, which is already installed and delivered to the treatment plant. So here's the temporary pumping schedule. So the first thing that's going to happen is CH2M Hill is going to go through a pre-acceptance test. So they're going to actually take river water, they're going to run it through the treatment plant, and then they're going to discharge it back to the Conaway Canal system. That's this period of time here. Once they're confident that the treatment plant is fine-tuned and running and meeting all of the requirements, they'll go through their acceptance test. They'll ramp up to 30 MGD for 10 days as part of that acceptance test. And then they'll go into the initial operations period. We envision we will drop the capacity of the temporary pumping plant down to 15 MGD. So the key dates are May 12th. That's when the pre-acceptance test starts. That's when CH2M Hill needs river water. That's when the temporary pumping plant has to be installed. The actual acceptance test is scheduled for May 26th. Assuming they pass the acceptance test, operations start June 9th. That's when the water will start being delivered to the cities May 26th, and then June 9th, the operations period starts. You see over here on the far right-hand side, August 2nd is the current date when RD 2035 and their contractor, Balfour Beatty, have scheduled completion of the acceptance of the joint intake and the agency's review and acceptance of our portion of that facility. So there's an 82-day period from May 12th to August 2nd where we need this temporary pumping according to the existing construction schedules. So when we look at the temporary pumping cost, and what we have in item number 3 before you is an $830,000 change order to CH2M Hill for 82 days of operation. In addition, there's an estimated $256,000 fuel bill, diesel fuel, to run the temporary pumps. That's part of our cost, but that'll be paid directly by the agency. If the test period goes shorter than 82 days or longer than 82 days, the change order provides for a $4,582 daily adjustment. And similarly, if the test period is shorter or longer than 82 days, the estimated fuel cost is $2,000 a day. When you look at the other alternative that we talked about at our last meeting, the delayed acceptance test, there would be certain costs that would have to be covered for CH2M Hill. They would have to have their project management and special decommissioning staff on standby. There would be a cost associated with that. We'd have to extend equipment warranties for 82 days. There'd be additional finance charge on their retention. We've assumed that we would give them half of their retention back. Their retention is $14 million or 10%. We would figure we would return at that point $5 million, but there'd still be financing on the outstanding $5 million retention. There'd be costs for bonds and insurance, and then their O&M staff. Their O&M staff, they're in the process now of hiring their staff. They've got 3 or 4 people, permanent staff hired, and they will have 3 or 4 more people hired by the time we get to next May. And then there'd be minimal O&M expenses, keeping the lights on at the plant, things like that. Then in addition, and when you look at a delayed acceptance, there would be costs and credits to the agency. There'd be savings to the agency for O&M, chemicals, and power required to produce surface water. Since we'd be in a delay mode, we wouldn't be incurring those costs to produce surface water. There would be a cost to the cities to continue to pay for the power to pump groundwater out of their existing well system instead of being able to utilize the surface water. And there'd be some percentage of the agency and program engineering staff time that would be required during this wait period. So when you take the costs associated with a temporary pumping plant and the costs associated with delay, and you plot them out over time, what you realize is that the temporary pumping plant, which is the green line, is cheaper. And particularly if the construction of the joint intake goes beyond August 2nd, the cost to delay continue to increase and continue to outpace the cost of the temporary pumping. The lines cross, so it's going to cost more initially to do with the temporary pumping, but then around mid to late May, the lines cross and it starts to become more expensive to delay, less expensive to do the temporary pumping. The other advantage or reality with this chart is that if you're delaying the blue line, you're not producing surface water. With the temporary pumping, you're producing the surface water starting May 26th. So it's cheaper when you look out and project the two alternatives. It's cheaper to do the temporary pumping, and the temporary pumping has the advantage of starting the delivery of surface water 82 days sooner than the delay option.
What if we're term 91'd out for next summer?
Well, we have, there's a good chance that if term 91 is in effect, our 45,000 acre foot water right would not be available. However, the CPG water, the 10,000 acre foot that we purchased from Conway, would be available. Even under what's called a Shasta critical year, the reduction would be 25%. We would still have 7,500 acre feet available. That contract, contracts like that have never been cut back more than that historically. It takes about 4,400 acre feet to run this 82-day test.
So my question is, are these costs based on an assumption of term 91 applying next summer?
These are based on the assumption that we have enough water to get through August 2nd, 4,400 acre feet, and assuming that we have at least 7,500 acre feet with our Conway right, so we would have about 3,000 additional beyond that.
Purchased
that would be available to run this test.
Thank you.
So just real quickly, in terms of what it will take to put this change order in place and get the temporary pumping plant up and running, we do have an agreement with RD 2035 that we would pay any additional costs that they have. So it's possible, although we don't think likely, that there will be some additional pumping costs that they incur. But if they do incur additional pumping costs, we would be responsible for that. As I mentioned earlier, we do have to get a change petition from the state board. That's to allow us to divert through the existing intake for this period of time. That requires consultation with Fish and Wildlife. We've met with both of them in the past few weeks. They don't see a fatal flaw with what we're trying to do, so we're confident that we'll be able to move forward with their approval of this petition. And then finally, the Division of Drinking Water, that's the former Health Department, they have to make sure or confirm or give their concurrence that pumping out of the canal is not going to cause any water quality issues or problems, and we've talked preliminarily with them as well and don't see a major problem. So, all that said, we do have this is the more detailed schedule and some off-ramps. If the board approves the change order today, we will incur between now and January 15th, CH will spend about $175,000. Once they sign the pump purchase order, an additional commitment of $50,000 will be incurred. April 1st, if we don't cancel if we stay with the change order, don't incur any major setbacks or problems and authorize them to go ahead with the delivery and installation of pumping equipment, we'll incur another commitment of $460,000. And once we start the pump test on May 12th, that's when the full cost of the change order, $829,000, would be realized going from that point and going forward. Questions?
On the graph that you had showing the cost comparisons, did that take any consideration of the city's reduction in cost for pumping, reducing at that point in May?
Yes, so the second to the last line item, there would be, if we're delaying the acceptance test, then there would be the city's cost to the cities to provide groundwater in lieu of surface water.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
you're correct in that it didn't reduce the cost. The temporary pumping option, by reducing the cost that would be realized by each of the cities by not having to pump groundwater, so it would reduce it. The temporary pumping.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. It's actually a better scenario than it looked. Okay,
what we showed is more conservative.
right. Okay, thanks.
And we can't offer $1 million incentive to Balfour Beatty to be done sooner?
Well, I think there's ongoing conversations with RD 2035 about, where we can have our testing, CH2M Hill's testing, take place at the same time that Balfour Beatty is doing their testing. There's also been good cooperation with Reclamation District 2035 in terms of having Balfour Beatty get our pumps and our facilities ready first. Mm-hmm. So we're continuing to try to minimize that 82-day gap, and we'll continue even going forward. But I think it's unrealistic to assume much more than 82 days at this point.
So physically and engineering-wise, it's not really doable, even with an incentive.
I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks, Brett. Anything?
I just want to say that the graph on page 7 is very helpful, and I appreciate whoever made that. As you recall from the last discussion, we were sort of trying to grasp, the various pluses and minuses, and the nice thing is the graph really addresses, as you mentioned, the point at which the two lines cross really tells us, where our thinking should change. And just looking at that time frame, it really does seem that the path you propose is the wisest one.
Thank you. I think we had a number of very productive discussions with CH2M Hill and with West Yost on the cost of both of these alternatives that enabled us to produce this graph. And actually, Lindsay gets the credit for summarizing it for us here.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dennis. Unless there are other comments, I'll entertain a motion on this item for, we'll combine 3 and 4 since 4 is the CEQA component to this. Is that correct? So,
Move the item?
Yes.
Move them both if that's allowed legally?
I'll second.
Do we need a public comment?
yeah. Public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Passes 4-0. That brings us to the Deutsche Bank promissory notes item. Brett and I are very familiar with this one, but maybe less so our Woodland counterparts. But
Yes, for the benefit of, in particular, for the Woodland representatives who, at your city level, you'll be considering this matter. My understanding is in the first quarter of 2016. City staff is working on it. But brief background is in 2010, when the agency purchased the water rights from Conaway Preservation Group, as part of that transaction, Conaway wanted to reserve the right to sell and transfer the debt, as well as convert the debt into a tax-exempt security. As currently structured, it's just a straight note, promissory note, and interest payable on that note is taxable to the receiver of those funds. And it's a year or two ago, about a year ago, CPG sold the notes to Deutsche Bank, and so Deutsche Bank is now the holder of that debt, and Deutsche Bank now is in the process of converting the security to a tax-exempt bonds, which is part of the 2010 agreement. The agency agreed to cooperate in doing so, so long as CPG, or now Deutsche Bank, covers the agency's costs. So a couple meetings ago, agency board staff authorized the general manager to retain a financing team, which he has done. The financing team have produced a substantial set of documents that are now before the agency to convert the City of Davis share of that debt to tax-exempt bonds. And as I mentioned, a similar transaction is underway for the City of Woodland share of the debt, which will come to the agency board next year. And I'm not sure how much level of detail. There's a resolution. The proposed action before the board is to approve the resolution that is in front of you. That resolution then would approve and authorize the manager to sign a series of contracts with trustees and Deutsche Bank and various other parties to move the transaction along. And I'll pause here to see how much level of detail the directors would like me to get into. I understand some of you have time constraints, so let me just pause there and see how much detail you'd like.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brett had to leave at 3:30. But Jim, I'm very familiar with this, but it's because our council saw it.
I have gone as deep as I felt I could into this. But I had just a couple of questions. What is it doesn't appear that there's any effect to the agency or to the cities themselves by doing this. I didn't see any financial cost to it. It's
correct. At the end of the day, in 2010 we approved I think a 26-year debt service payment, and those annual payments can't change as a part of this deal. They may, because of rounding and other things, tweak a little bit, so the numbers may not line up substantially, but the financial burden on the cities should not change.
What does change in terms of my assumption is that, and I could again be wrong, that the value goes down when it becomes a tax-free instrument. Is that correct? Or this may not even be pertinent to the conversation. I'm just curious.
Well, do you have an answer to that? I'm going to defer that to Mr. Navazio.
My understanding is that on the secondary market, which Deutsche Bank intends to have the bond sold, is that the value actually goes up, so that the current holder of the note could stand to gain from selling of the bonds. So my assumption is they're doing this for a reason, and that's because
that makes sense. So where's the downside? I mean, is there a downside to
No,
this?
there's no downside as long as the team that has been working with the agency, I mean, they have it pretty wired. So
It's just
we're really
crossing the
just
T's and dotting the
facilitating
I's.
the conversion of one security into another security that on the secondary market has value to the current bondholder.
Okay.
And I think, from the agency's perspective, under the original notes, we would be paying a certain amount every year to CPG. Now we're going to pay that same amount, essentially that same amount, to whoever the bondholder is. So the benefit is on the bondholders, and from the agency perspective, we're paying the same amount every year.
Okay. Thank you.
It'd be nice if we could get a little bit of a cut on that profit.
We had that discussion. Yeah.
But I would add, since we got a little bit in detail real short, is that the way that the original promissory notes were structured for both the city of Woodland and the city of Davis, there's coverage and subordination and coverage that needs to be done. So the deals that are being worked on, for the city of Davis and the city of Woodland, are also being done so to ensure that the conversion of the note to a municipal tax exempt bond does not result in additional burden on each of the city's financial statements relative to the amount of debt that is being incurred and the amount of rate revenue that the two cities are going to need to cover that debt. So that issue is also, that would have been an indirect impact had that not been written into the deal as currently structured.
I'm ready to move on.
All right, great. Is it any? No. So
So I'll
that a
make the
motion?
motion that we approve the item.
Second?
moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Passes 3-0 with Lee absent. That brings us to the long-range board calendar, item 6.
Yes, board members, as shown on the calendar, it's not anticipated at this point that we will need a board meeting in December, assuming that no unexpected issues arise. In January, we've penciled in the similar Deutsche Bank transaction for Woodland and also a mid-year budget update. And then from that point forward, again, not seeing anything requiring board attention, at least at this point in February and March, but we will continue to update this as we move forward.
Thanks. Any comments?
So what we'll do in terms of the December meeting is as we get closer, as we've done in the past, and we don't foresee a need for the meeting, we'll send out a cancellation notice.
All right, great. But it's your sense that it will be canceled then?
Yes.
Okay, so. Okay, that brings us to correspondence. Anything to report on that?
We got 2 late letters of support for our Prop 1 applications, so we have the copies for you here, and then we're passing those along or adding those to the applications that were previously submitted.
This is from OE3?
Yes.
Right? Okay. Great, moving on to Technical Advisory Committee comments. Anything?
Yeah, in the city of Davis, we continue to install our local pipelines.
I keep hearing it from the constituents. When are you going to be done? Yeah.
It's
It
unfortunately
looks
going to be
great,
a
though.
while still.
I love every minute of that pipe getting put in.
The good news is we are on schedule to be able to receive the water when the agency is ready to deliver the water, so we've made some good progress that way. We're approximately 40% done with our stage or phase 1, which is the initial phase to take the water, and so we're doing quite well time-wise. Unfortunately, there are traffic impacts. One traffic impact to look forward that's coming up is at Anderson and Covell, where we're going to do some night work, and we have let the residents in that area know. It's because we have to move diagonally through that intersection with the pipeline, and we have put together a traffic control plan to divert, but that will occur around the middle of December, and there'll be more information forthcoming to you, but I just wanted to let you have a heads up about that, because that'll probably be another public concern. So,
If you could give them the email address of bill.marble@cityofwoodland.org. Direct all their comments to that address. I'd appreciate it. So.
It's all being forwarded.
To Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, the City of Woodland, our pipeline is complete at this point. We're currently working on our 2 ASR wells that are going in, and we're preparing for injecting orthophosphate into our water system to help line our cast iron pipes with a surface that'll lock the iron into the pipe, so when we put in surface water, we won't get the water discoloration coming out. Other than that, we're moving right along.
Chair Wilk, one additional comment. You have at your places the project update. But to build on Greg's comments and further our public outreach, we're anticipating that, starting pretty much the first of the year, we'll be coordinating much more closely with each of the two cities and their plans for introducing the surface water and getting ready for the switch over to the surface water. So we'll have a change and more, perhaps a more targeted public outreach working with the two cities as we get closer to that May date when we actually start delivering surface water.
That's great. Anything else from the technical? All right, great. Any board member comments?
Just one thing I noticed, the April meeting on this calendar is on a Wednesday. I think maybe that's a typo for the date.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sid, thanks, Bill. Anything else? Jim? Sid?
Yeah, I just want to say that many of you know I'm retiring at the end of December. And since there will be no December meeting, this will be my last meeting, I guess, of this with this group. It's been a great project. I think it's my longest running project at the university since I was there in '94 when Jim Egan and Betsy Marchand and Fran Barcali let us know they'd filed the water rights application without telling us about it. Anyway, it's been a really great project, and I'm so glad to see it come to fruition. The other change that's just occurred this week is that David Phillips, who's my alternate, has just taken a position as the Associate Vice President for Energy and Sustainability for the entire University of California. So I'm not sure who will be representing us at the board meeting in January, but I'll let Dennis and Dan know as soon as we work that out. So anyway, it's been great, and I hope I'll be there in September when the dedication occurs. So anyway, thank you all, and it's been great.
Thanks for your... Exactly.
Yes, because I went to work for the university 4 years before I finished my PhD, so I was still a student until '95.
Well, thank you, Sid. Thanks for all your service, too.
I do have an announcement that we didn't make, that at our last council meeting, we did vote on our water rates. We had the 218 process brought it at a 17% level increase each year for 4 years, and we were able to drop it down to 9.5% this coming year, and then after that, we're projecting that we'll be at about 3.5%. For a few years after that. So we were able to do better than our projections, and we're really proud of being able to reduce the rate a little bit.
That's great. Wow.
Or the rate of increase. You got to be careful on that.
That is a good point. Yeah. But that's pretty significant. Yeah. All right, nothing from me. So unless there's an objection, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.